when people start to really, really get past the initial struggle with their stage one recovery, where they're struggling with their physical craving or that desire to drink or use, and they get way past it. Now they're living their life and they're sponsoring other people and helping other people understand this. That's what shows up, man, is these moments. And when I was first exposed to Bill's letter, the way that I could really, really relate is to see his reaction to when people didn't do what he wanted them to do.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome. I'm Tom Rutledge. Here we are with our wonderful group of our producer, Patrick Newman, and with me, as always, Dr. Alan Berger.
God, I'm glad you remembered my name.
I got it.
Lately, I'm not so sure my name. I'm so oriented with this movie.
Hey, listen, you have been through a lot lately, and I'm sure I know we're gonna move into looking at emotional sobriety through the lens of your brand new book, which is a wonderful book, and but I'm sure you're going to have some stories of down boots on the ground practice of emotional sobriety during this giant move that you've made.
You've heard this before, Tom, and I'm sure it's been true in your life. Sometimes I think I write for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Help certain principles, because this move and some of the things leading to the move and, the challenges I've faced in the last, I'd say, 4 months have given me a lot of opportunity to practice these principles that we're going to be talking about here in this show and in the upcoming shows. And the good news is that this stuff works. I'm still here.
Yes,
I'm still, I haven't done this perfectly, and I don't expect that anymore of myself, except at certain moments. but I can say, and this is, I got to share in a meeting out here. So I've been out in Pennsylvania now for about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I guess today is 3 weeks, actually, 3 weeks in a day or 2 days. And a week ago on Saturday, I shared at an AA meeting at Harmony Hollow Ranch.
Oh yeah, you told us about that. Sounds like a beautiful place.
An amazing experience. And I shared some of the things I've shared in my book, especially the story about Maddie, which we'll get into later on at some point. I love it when I discover something that's not just theoretical, but that is practical, and meaning that it has relevance to my life and how I live my life. And that's the thing that I love about what we've been exploring now through this whole COVID thing, is that there's opportunities here, right? Incredible opportunities here for us to take that next step in our recovery, that next step in our life, where I'm now being able to cope with things that before would have baffled me. That before would have just overwhelmed me, and I would have gotten just frustrated and angry and made the situation worse. I was good at that. I got to tell you that if you needed a situation to be made worse than it was, for someone to come along and exacerbate it,
I know the guy to call. It's right.
I mean, I was proficient at that stuff, man. It was amazing how I could go step in there and I could just take a bad situation and make it worse in a hot second. And the great thing about emotional sobriety that I've been discovering, or that I've discovered and that we've been discovering, and in the Thursday night meeting that we've been having now for some time, is that this is a way of contributing in a very different way to what's going on around us, is to really be a part. And I heard this in the rooms for a long time, but it never made as much sense as it makes now, is to be a part of the solution, not the problem, or a part of the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. And the practical part, and another word that comes to my mind too is specific. It's very specific. It's in the devil, the devil's in the details, they say. So I think that's where the solutions are too. And that's where we work. And I want to tell a brief bit about my emotional sobriety from yesterday, the 4th of July, because I want to thank you for this, because of the work you're doing and the work that you have me doing. I did something last night that I haven't done since, since way back in the 1900s. It's, and that is that I won't go into details about this today, but it's like I am avidly against the noise of fireworks as animal abuse. I have made a stand on that. I have ranted, I have raved, I have tried to do smart things like try to get some attention to that. But on the 4th of July, Dee Dee said to me the other day when she knew we were going to be recording this and this episode, and she said, well, you're going to talk about the 4th of July, right? And I said, well, the 4th of July doesn't necessarily have anything to do with emotional sobriety. And she said, it does for you. And so because Dee Dee has a way of just calling me out with very simple ways, but it's like I have for the longest time because of I have cussed, I have screamed into the backyard and down at our barn and insulted everybody who's firing off fireworks. I live in rural Tennessee where we're not talking about just organized fireworks displays. We're talking about everybody is blowing stuff up for days. And I knew the worst of it was last night, 4th of July. And I made a deal with myself that, and it's not that yelling is not an option to release stuff. We live out in the middle of nowhere. So that's a good thing I could do that. But what I know about myself is the more I do that, the angrier I get in this particular case. Or sometimes letting off that steam is a good thing. And sometimes it basically just revs me up. And I decided I was going to practice acceptance. I made up a little story that said that there are so many explosions that are going to happen tonight, and that every one that goes off means one less.
Oh,
And so I'm going to inwardly express relief with each one that get, not necessarily, I didn't track them all, but each one that gets to me, I'm going to make a shift. I'm going to go from the frustration and the rage to relief. And I consciously made that shift. And of course, I mean, they were, as we talk about all the time, they were both there. The rage didn't go anywhere. It's right there. But I felt so much better through the course of the night. And I didn't even realize when I was taking the dog out late, and I said, well, the fireworks may still be going on too. And I was worried about taking the dog out. And Dee Dee said, no, they stopped. And I went, really? So anyway, that may seem like a small thing for some people. It's a huge thing for me. And it is about the details. It's about the specifics. And I also would say it's also about the fact that I think to a large extent our writing is us talking to ourselves and asking people if they would like to eavesdrop on our conversations. They may, and hope that they can get something from it.
yep, that's right. No, I love it. I love it. And look, what you did there, and I think it's really worth underscoring this and highlighting it, is that you shifted your perspective in how you looked at it.
Yep.
The situation didn't change. It's just the way you looked at it changed. And that shift you had
Mm-hmm.
created a huge difference. And that a lot of times we're going to be finding it as we discuss
Right.
emotional sobriety, is how even a small 5% shift in your consciousness in a way of looking at it can have 100% impact on your experience.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing how much we get from so little with emotional sobriety. And that's the way I love to say it. We get so much from so little, because these little shifts are showing something that we talked about last time, this flexibility. And I know for me that flexibility is something I didn't have. I was so fixed in the way I approached things.
Me too. And this is a great example, but there's lots of other things my wife could tell you about in our marriage. Is the idea that the more intensely I feel about something, the more fixed I was in my position, which
Yes.
is also, by the way, the exact opposite of what we need to be. I mean, we need to hear that. Politicians in the world need to hear that. The more intensely we are fixed, the more we need to explore the possibilities of flexibility and what you always say, looking for new possibilities.
That's right. That's right. No, it's so true. It's so true. And I talk to you about tennis sometimes because
Mhm.
I love tennis, and I got certified as a sports counselor many years ago. And we used to say, when you play, you need 100% commitment, but no attachment.
That's beautiful.
100%
Yeah.
commitment to what you're doing and how you're playing out there, but you cannot be attached to it. You've got to let it go. And like you said, is that flexibility of, okay, look, I missed that shot, letting go of this idea. I'm going to make 100% of my shots. You go out on a tennis court with that, you're not going to last long. I
Right.
mean, it's like more people lose matches than win matches. I mean, it's proven that you're going to win more points by the other guy losing them than by hitting outright winners.
Right. Well, I would imagine, and I played very little tennis, but did for a short time when I was younger, and I would imagine understanding, because I read Tim Galloway's book, which was the
Oh,
first,
great
which
one.
was the first. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was the first self-help book I ever read, because
The first book on the intrapsychic process, because he talks
it's I
about
think about everything I do every day of my life in terms of the internal, but that inner voice, and how, and he also taught the basic technique, which is you don't get rid of the inner voice. You simply it's the psychology of mantra. Bounce hit was my favorite
yeah,
exercise in that book. It's like, instead of thinking about the last shot that I missed, or how my feet are feeling, or where, where I am on the court, all I'm doing is, when I hit the ball, I say the word hit. And when it comes back and bounces on my side of the court, I say bounce. And it's like, and that holds my attention. And it's like, it was amazing, because and it kept me in the moment. I had no idea that I was reading a self-help book. I thought I was just trying to beat Bill Powell, who was really good at tennis, and was a very arrogant guy about tennis. Nice guy otherwise, but I read it just to beat him, and did once, only once. But that's it. We have to shift it, and it's like, and we don't have to shift it that's the other thing, is it's almost arbitrary how we shift it. I made up this story yesterday. There's truth to the story, because the fireworks were going to end, but it's like the idea that there's a set amount that are going to happen, and each one means less. It's like, I mean, I truly just pulled that out of the air, or out of my something, and it might, and by the way, I would say to anybody listening, if you do this, if you're experimenting with this, though, because this is not the first time I've tried to change things with this perspective change shift. It's like, it's exactly like the missing the tennis ball. If you miss it, if it doesn't work, that's okay. Try the exact same thing again. Make a change. Try something entirely different. One of the things we want to be teaching about emotional sobriety is that flexibility is one of the primary principles. I think it is. You're more the one who has the thoughts organized. Does that make sense?
listen, I told you that one of the things after you write a book, you realize, well, what would I have added to that book that wasn't it?
Right.
And I'll
Right.
tell you, one of the things, even though I do talk about flexibility a lot and the importance of it, but
Mhm.
I think it's a term that needs to be repeated over and over and over again, because it's central to this whole process about getting unstuck. So, let's look at that a little bit. And we want to walk through the book and the 12 essential insights for emotional sobriety. And, in the first chapter, we talk about, getting unstuck. But let's look at
And,
both.
and let me just say this: I love that you start this book there. It's like it's very, and I love just the simple chapter 1. I'm looking at it right now: being stuck and getting unstuck. First of all, I love the simplicity of that. And it's like, and I think so much, we were talking just before we started recording today, and you were saying you want to go over some general ideas about emotional sobriety. And I'm going like, and what I said to you is like, I don't know that there's a better concept than being unstuck, getting unstuck. Because I think that's what this offers. That's what emotional sobriety offers. Unstuck. And what do you get instead of stuck? You get flexibility. We're talking about that, and the one you talk about a lot, which is freedom.
That's right. That's right. And in the one perspective here that's in, we go to this point about cognitive flexibility or flexibility in general, is this concept that being stuck does not mean something's wrong in your recovery. And
Oh,
I just want to emphasize this so strongly because so many of us, and I can relate back to this myself. I think, my God, I'm working a program. I shouldn't have the problems I'm having. That somehow the program was supposed to be this magical elixir that now that I've taken it, it's going to somehow be this panacea. It's going to cure everything. And what I realized was, well, it can be that, but there's a step in between that process is using this program to deal with being stuck and to expect myself to be stuck because what that reveals are my working points. So that's what I love about this is that we're now in recovery, clear-headed enough, sober enough, clear thinking enough to start to see, my God, let me take a look at where I'm stuck right now. Let me see
right.
what's going on. What is happening here? How come, this is going down for me without putting that judgment on it, Tom?
Well, and this I hadn't thought about this before, but this is something that I point out to clients a lot, and it's a perfect place to put it, I think, in our discussion, and then we can return to it. But one of the things to remember is that those inner committee members, those saboteurs, those negative voices, they not only come with us, but they read everything we read, and they go to every therapy session we go to, and it's like, and they use all this information. So one of the things that certainly I think has happened to me, sounds like it has to you, is that my should monster begins to pretend to be part of the team.
Yeah.
And so the idea is he puts on the lab coat, maybe throws a stethoscope around his neck to look really good, and comes in offering this, and what he's doing is he's going to read what you wrote in your book, and if somebody's listening to this and if you have a strong inner critic, you're going to read what Alan has written in the book. And if you're aware that somebody's telling you, oh, this is pointing out how you're doing it all wrong, it's like, I promise you, that's not your authentic self. That's not the self we're talking to when we're talking about recovery. And know that every one of us has this. We have to remain vigilant about maintaining who in our head is talking. And so when that critic is talking, it can use anything to beat us up. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
In the book, you use an expression defining recovery in a way that excludes us from it, which I thought was very interesting. And could you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Well, I started to make some reference to it a moment ago. So if I like to think of it this way, Patrick, is if I take the dirty shoe off one foot and just put it on the other foot, it's still a dirty shoe, even though it's on my other foot. So if I come into recovery expecting the same things from myself that I expected before, but now because I have the 12 steps in my tool bag that I'm going to pull off what I couldn't pull off before, I'm missing the boat because those old ideas, which we hear that phrase all the time in the rooms, until we let go of our old ideas, the result is nil. Well, I didn't understand what that meant completely. I mean, I understood it in terms of, at that point, my simplistic approach to recovery. Well, my old idea was that if you got a problem, pick up a drink, right? That's going to make me feel better. So I applied it very simplistically to that idea. I didn't generalize that to my life, that, my God, my old ideas include all of the way that I thought before. Not that all of it was so all wrong, but that I needed to have a curiosity that, that maybe there's another way of approaching life. Maybe there's another way of thinking about this. The idea that maybe my expectations are a part of the problem, I'll tell you, that did not become starkly revealed to me until much later on.
Mhm.
For some reason, I was still highly reactive, incredibly reactive, because I still thought these ideas I had about how life was supposed to be, how I was supposed to be, the should monster had his field day, in terms of what was going
Right,
on.
and things were supposed to be getting better, right? Because now you had finally wised up and were doing something positive, healthy, focused on that kind of stuff. So of course things should be getting better now.
Yes, that's right. And they did it initially in terms of the physical part of it. I felt so much better because I wasn't putting all this toxin into my body.
Right, because it really is a bad idea to drink like we drank.
Oh my God. I mean, so I started to get better physically. And for a while, that did create kind of a honeymoon effect. But then life happened, is the way I like to think about it. Then some of my expectations, like I'll never forget. So when I first got sober, you guys have probably heard parts of the story before. I was at the Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station, and I was the third Marine admitted to the program. And after I had about, I'd say maybe 45, 60 days clean, I was invited to come on board to be a counselor. Well, I was the third Marine admitted. My buddy Bill was the second Marine to be admitted. So they also asked Bill to come on board because Bill and I were very enthusiastic about our recovery. So we're now counselors over at this step. Some days a step ahead of the guys we were counseling, some days a step behind them. But one of the things that would happen is on a weekly basis, we'd sit down and we'd have like a group therapy where we would deal with our feelings towards each other. And I'll never forget, Bill came in. He says, I got a grievance to air with you. I go, well, what is it, man? And I'm like, oh my God, what is it? It's like, oh, this is going to be bad. He goes, have you noticed that every time that we go ride our bikes, because our form of transportation was 2-speed bicycles at that point in time, every time we ride our bikes, you have to be in the front? And I go, no, I didn't. Obviously you noticed that, but I sure didn't notice it. He says, why do you have to be number one all the time, Alan? And it goes, oh my God, man, I didn't see this. It was so habitual on my part that I get on it, and it was a part of the thing that was driving me. I always had to be number one. I had to be in the lead. I had to know. I had to, all this other nonsense that I put on my, on part of my should demands on myself.
You put it on yourself. Yeah,
I totally put it on myself. Nobody expected that of me. And Bill says, I don't mind you taking the lead sometimes, but sometimes that I want to. And then I says, well, I appreciate that. And then my little cocky ass said, how come you haven't talked to me? How come you haven't talked about this to me before? And then he looked at something. He says, because I don't like conflict. I don't like confronting people on stuff. And we looked at something together. But it was, and I loved those days. As much as I dreaded being confronted, I also loved being confronted because it was pulling some of these blind spots. It was exposing some of these blind spots I had that I just wasn't aware of these things. And now the awarenesses were starting to, I like to say, you talk about fireworks, I call the awarenesses popping off. Oh yeah. They were these little kind of tiny insight explosions is the way I've referred.
Well, it's also what you just did with your hand on your chest, which is even if you're just listening, people probably heard it. It was, and so one of the things, those of us who have needed boundaries, we've needed somebody. It's like this is an actual experience of a power greater than ourselves. Now, the power greater than yourself is not your friend, but it is caring about something bigger. It's like caring about the process. And it's like, I heard a long time ago, somebody who does family stuff says children need parents to be benevolent powers greater than themselves. They don't need to be more powerful than the parent. And if the parent is more powerful, they don't need them to be aggressive or malicious in any way. And so But we need that. To me, that comes into higher power so much, is when you care about something bigger and all this, and you're right. It's a mixed thing, because we dread it. I hate it. I hate that. I agree with you. I hate that confrontation thing. That was so scary. And but it was like, I now know how much good it did me every step of the way.
Yeah.
When I was, and it was, it was good to be with people who would be willing to be that honest with me. But ultimately, too, we credit where credit is due. We were doing that because we were investing in something bigger.
Yes, that's right.
We were always talking about giving our power away in codependency. It's like, this is choosing to give our power to something about that includes us. It's not to something or somebody else, but it includes us, but it's bigger than us.
That's right. I love the way you're saying that, because before there was nothing bigger than us. I
No.
can relate to that. It's
And
like,
it scared the shit out of us. Basically, we didn't consciously necessarily know that, but it's like it was not a good thing. It's like, I'm the one who's the most powerful person here, and I wasn't necessarily thinking those exact thoughts, but I was, because I could manipulate, I could do all this stuff, I could get away with anything. And and I remember when, long before I ever got sober, I'll tell some stories sometime down the line about some of the early people in my life, long before I got sober, who actually saw through that and confronted it, and how absolutely pissed off I was about that, because they were, talk about not meeting expectations. They were not reading the rule book, man. They weren't supposed to be saying the truth to me.
yeah, that's right.
But you were at a place with your friend where it felt good.
Well, that's right. Well, we were committed to that process, which is, I think, really cool, that I had the good fortune of being in a place that was so, because this program was just beginning in the Marine Corps. It was like the program was discovering what it was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
just like we were discovering what we were going to be, and what
Oh, it's beautiful. Talk about just beginning. Yeah, somebody comes in and they're sober for a few days and they make them the counselor. It's like, that's beautiful. It's like, I mean, talk about flexibility.
No, listen, and I was on the Marine Corps boxing team at that point. So I was, it was a in some many ways a very welcomed shift in my temporary duty station, because I had been on the boxing team for about 2 months, and I wasn't bad. I wasn't the worst guy
Mm,
on the team. I wasn't the best guy on the team. I was learning a lot, and there's some guys that really took me under the wing on the boxing team. But I'll tell you, man, I mean, the Marine Corps had a high degree of physical training already. This
mm,
boxing team pumped it up. I mean, we were running between 8 and 10 miles a day. We were in the gym in the afternoon, hitting bags for 2 hours. We were sparring. I mean, you were on a team, but you weren't just sitting around eating bonbons. That's for darn sure. But it was great to join the staff over at the counseling center, because they really didn't have. We became the first counselors.
that's great.
They had a staff sergeant in charge who was in the program, but he was busy administrating the program. So me and Bill, and then eventually this guy Larry Fry, we were the three counselors at the
Mm,
center, and we'd run the groups. It was great, man. We ran groups. We didn't know we were doing these groups,
yeah.
but what we were applying is everything that we were learning. We'd hear it and then we'd share it. We'd
Mhm.
hear it and we'd share it, and so it was like this stuff had immediate application because we didn't have anything. I
Oh,
mean,
that's so true, Alan. The idea that, yeah, that there was no delay in whatever we learned, because there was no reservoir in what we
there was
learned.
no resume.
It was just,
Never
we just,
bag a trick.
whatever.
Not a
Yeah, I
trick.
did that so often when I was in therapy, because whatever my therapist would do with me, I would start doing with my clients immediately. You know.
Same thing, man. Whatever Tom would say to me, I'd bring back to the counseling center. Whatever I'd hear in a meeting, I'd share.
We've talked about getting stuck in recovery doesn't mean something's wrong with the program. Usually it's the opposite. And through the character of Roger in the first chapter of the book, he's lamenting his unhappiness with the program, asking himself, asking you, what constitutes a great program? And I think like the thesis of his problem is like, I still feel like shit. I've been through all this. I've cleaned up my act.
Mhm.
And why do I feel like shit, and what needs to change? And so it has something to do with expectation, right? Is what you're
Well, that's
saying.
what Roger
Mhm.
came to. And let me just say this, as people are out there reading this book, they're going to hear, I really bring in a lot of examples from my work with people and from my own personal experience in life. All the examples I bring in, I do try to, I go to great lengths to try to hide the identity. In fact, almost every client except Brian was able to pull
Mhm.
the covers off of that one, and we'll get to that. And
Yeah.
I thought when we hit that part of the book that we'll invite Brian to join us that day.
Oh, absolutely. It's
We got to invite Brian in for that one.
mhm.
But they're all composites. So these are a result of many different clinical experiences I have that I try to put together into an image that picks up a theme. Everybody's unique, I think, that walks into my office, but there are some common themes that we have. It's like the stuff that we talk about with these expectations, right? Expectations are resentments under construction, right? I mean, we talk about these things. Well, I see that a lot. I see a lot of people coming in the program that are working, quote, what they call a good program, meaning they're sponsoring people. And, when I was in Hermosa Beach, where my office was before COVID hit and before I moved to Pennsylvania, I had been in that South Bay recovery community for 30 years. So I had clients that came to see me at many different stages in the recovery, early recovery, you know, now well into recovery, middle stages of recovery, later recovery, and stuff like that. So I got the good fortune of being able to experience people as they changed, and people's lives changed. The one thing that didn't change was getting hung up on their resentments, because people couldn't see that this thing that I'm upset about has to do with this unenforceable rule that I have. So many people thought, I'll never forget this one guy. He comes to mind, and I'll just share it. He and his wife were in recovery together, and he had this idea that they should be having sex at least 3 times a week. And if they didn't have sex 3 times a week, something was wrong with the relationship. But more specifically, something was wrong with his wife. And so he'd come in, and what brought him into therapy is she's got a problem. She doesn't want to have sex 3 times a week. So obviously, she has a sexual problem. He couldn't in any way fathom that maybe the problem had nothing to do with her lack of appetite, but his expectation and how he was approaching this whole thing. This guy had 10 years of recovery, Patrick. He had been in recovery 10 years. He could not see that the way that he was approaching his wife and the expectation, and then how angry he would get with her when she wouldn't have sex with him, and how bad he'd make her feel. And then what she started to do was just surface him. She'd have sex, but she wouldn't be into it. And then his thing was, what's wrong? Why aren't you into this? I mean, and it was like, so the problem got so compounded because he couldn't see at all that there was nothing wrong with him wanting to be close to his wife. Had he went to her and says, God, you're so darn sexy tonight, and I really love you, and I'd like to be closer to you tonight. I'd like to make love to you tonight. And if there was room for her to say no, and then for them to deal with it, he could have a greater intimacy with her. But when she'd say no, he'd get mad at her. He'd get angry. He'd storm out of the bedroom, slam the door, go sleep on the couch and stuff. And then she's sitting in there because of her issues, feeling bad, like she did something wrong and what's wrong with her. And then she started to do the negative arrogance that obviously he's upset. Something's wrong with me. I should want to have sex more. I mean, it just got into a death spiral for them. But that's the kind of stuff that when people start to really, really get past the initial struggle with their stage one recovery, where they're struggling with their physical craving or that desire to drink or use, and they get way past it. Now they're living their life and they're sponsoring other people and helping other people understand this. That's what shows up, man, is these moments in our relationships with people is really where these expectations are going to be most starkly revealed. They're going to
Oh,
be.
they're the mirrors. They're how we see ourselves.
They are how we
Yeah,
see ourselves.
yeah.
So that's a great
Absolutely.
question, Patrick. It really is, because that's where, to me, that's when I related, look, listen, or let me say it another way. When I was first exposed to Bill's letter, or re-exposed, I was exposed to
Mhm,
it back in '71, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
mhm.
There was
You
things
weren't ready. You weren't
I
ready for
wasn't
that.
ready to.
Yeah.
I didn't have the consciousness that could
Mhm, mhm,
really, really assimilate what Bill was saying. But when I got re-exposed to it after around 20 years or so, right around the time that Bill was writing about this stuff, I could the way that I could really, really relate is to see his reaction to when people didn't do what he wanted them to do. Well, this is an exciting topic. I'm so glad we're going to start exploring this stuff. And
I love that we're gonna use your book as a guide to go through this stuff, and it's um and maybe it will help me stay on track.
well,
Ooh.
I don't think it might be too much of an expectation, Tom.
I can.
We might have
I
to.
will try.
So
It's
here's the other.
yeah.
If you're listening, get the book if you don't have it already, and
Mm-hmm,
read with us. And
mm-hmm,
look, please, if you've got questions about a particular chapter,
mm-hmm,
submit them to Tom
mm-hmm.
or to me or to Patrick.
Yeah.
We will read them on the air. We will do our best to answer those questions.
I love, by the way, I love it when we get responses and questions from
And
comments and responses from people, and love to bounce off of those because to me, that's, one of my things is I'm always saying, and is, join the conversation. And I mean, obviously everybody can't just be in this conversation, but that's the way you can. And we like doing this. We want to be able to do this, and
we know
we
you.
want people to hear it. Yeah.
There's a lot of ways you can spend your time, and if you choose to share it with us, we are grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll continue this on. We're going to continue. We'll talk a little bit more about chapter 1 and start to get into chapter 2 next time. But Patrick, did you have any final thought before we wrap up today's show?
Yeah, well, I as a preview for next week, I'd like to get a little further into how our long neglected true self grates against our false self, because that's also one of the central mechanisms of
Yes.
emotional sobriety, right? I imagine.
That's a great sentence, isn't it? It grates
Mm-hmm.
against
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah, I love that one.
yes. That's a Vince Hyman sentence.
It's a Vince special.
That's a Vince. That I can tell you guys exactly what's said, because when it sounds like that, that's a Vince Hyman said.
I love that because I remember at your if you remember the at your virtual release party, yeah, one of the pieces I read from your book, I complimented the exact a certain sentence, and I said, "This is a beautiful sentence." And I just, as a writer, I love the sentence, and I said, just sort of off the cuff, now of course, if Vince, the editor, is responsible for this sentence, I mean, you can tell me that, and of course, then afterwards you said, "Yeah, he was." It's like.
Well, that's the gift about having a great editor, isn't
Oh,
it?
no
I'll
kidding.
tell you, man.
Editing has made I mean, people, I tell people when they're starting out writing, if you're listening to this and you're starting out writing, whatever you do not become what I call a premature prima donna. It's like, you don't mess with my work. It's like, no, find somebody who can really get in there with you and help you make it better. It's wonderful.
Vince has helped me become a much better writer
Mm-hmm.
by being open to his input and feedback, and it's just remarkable. But that sentence is a great example of it, right?
Yeah,
And
it's
it's such
good.
an important one, Patrick. So let's start with that at our next show.
Absolutely. And, just one last thing is uh, you describe emotional sobriety as recovery's, or maybe Bill Wilson described it as recovery's next frontier, new
Mm-hmm.
frontier, something like that. But it's, you can see how this process is never going to run out of gas, because it's about plumbing the emotional depths and the things that don't necessarily have to do with addiction, in its concrete form, but more about like all of the
Yes.
all the laundry you've got to do
Well, listen,
on a regular basis. Yeah.
I think that's a great observation on your
Mm-hmm.
part. And Bill even said that he felt that these issues are what contributed to him becoming an alcoholic in the first place, because he did not know how to cope with what was going on in life. And the alcohol gave him freedom from his lack of ability to cope. And I say that all the time, is that I do think that a lot of us were pursuing emotional freedom because that's what we're all hoping for and wanting in our life, is to be free from all of this. The problem is that the way that we've sought that did not create freedom. It further imprisoned us.
Right.
And that is the moment, if you will. That's the moment that of awakening that a lot of us have, is, my God, it wasn't just the alcohol. That wasn't the problem. It was big part of the problem. We're not minimizing that. But there's other things going on. And putting a plug in the jug, an important first step, no question about it. But it's not enough.
It creates an illusion of the solution.
Oh, that's well stated. Everybody hear
Yeah,
that? An
yeah,
illusion of the solution.
hmm
The rhymester
Rhyming.
is rhyming again. All right. Well, I'm excited about this. And Patrick, and I love your comments about this, because you're now reading the book for the first time.
And I'm loving it, and I think it's going to be great to run through it over this next series of weeks and months.
It's going to be great. So we'll see everybody next week.
Until next time.
Till next time.
Tend your life, tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.